How did Joe Goldberg, a hopeless romantic and disturbed serial killer with really good hair, go from this to this? That's right, we're covering the entire story of You. So grab your popcorn and get ready to see a lot of murder and a lot of hot makeout scenes. For context, You is a psychological thriller series based on the book series written by Carolyn Kepnes. It follows the story of Joe Goldberg, a totally normal bookstore manager who's just looking for love, right? No, actually, there's a lot more to him than meets the eye. So let's get right into it. Joe Goldberg is a bookstore manager in the city of New York, but today isn't like any other day because he meets an aspiring writer and MFA student, Guinevere Beck. As a book nerd himself, they exchange some intelligent/flirty banter that a YouTuber like me, let's be honest, would not get. But Joe doesn't want to get too ahead of himself. He doesn't want to get his art broken again, so he wants to get to know Beck before pursuing her. It starts semi-incoherently enough as he scrolls through her public social media profiles, but soon enough, Joe has her entire schedule memorized. Yeesh. He creepily watches her while she enjoys a night out with friends. He then follows Beck home and is not happy to see that she has got an on-again, off-again boyfriend, a certified asshole named Benji.
Not to sound judgy, but this guy is everything wrong with America.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Joe. The next day, Joe breaks into Beck's apartment by calling the gas company and saying his girlfriend's apartment has a gas leak. He almost gets caught while hiding in the shower, but luckily for Joe, Beck's friends invite her out for drinks, and she leaves. Yeah, it would have looked something like that. Later, while he's following her home, Beck drunkenly stumbles onto the subway tracks, and Joe heroically rescues her before getting barfed on. Ew. He steals her phone and takes her home, but he gets pissed when he sees that Benji is there. Yeah, I ain't a fan of exes either. Later, Joe lures Benji into the shop basement under the guise of interviewing him about his soda company.
Hey, man, I'm thinking maybe...
He should have seen it coming. No one cares about your soda company, bro. Then we see Beck visiting Joe in the bookstore the next day to thank him, and it looks like he might get a date for his efforts. Alright. In the next episode, Joe's really looking forward to his first official date with Beck, but first he's got to figure out what to do with the bloodied up trust fund baby locked in his bookstore basement. If you're wondering what this glass cage thingy is right here, I've got you. You see, this is actually a glass box used to keep rare books. It keeps them fresh and all, but I guess Joe plans to use it for something else entirely.
I'm gonna give you my family lawyer's number. He'll get you paid.
Of course he thinks I want money.
Stupid, innocent Benji. Joe wants something much more valuable than money. After that, we see that Joe is watching Beck from afar while she meets with her grad school advisor, Paul Leahy. Leahy makes a move on Beck, but she turns him down. He threatens to take away her teaching assistant position, and consequently, her housing. What an asshole. Naturally, Beck calls Joe and confides in him about her bad day. Double win. Joe also gets an invite to a party hosted by Beck's friend, Peach. But Peach isn't really getting good vibes from our MC here. Joe tells Beck to stand up for herself, so she turns the tables on Leahy, threatening to expose him as a sexual harasser of 6 different women. The plan works, and Beck kisses Joe at the bookstore, and she gives him a donut. It's kinda cute. Later we see that Benji is trying to bargain for his life by showing Joe a video of him drunkenly hazing a fraternity pledge to death. But Joe isn't interested in making a deal, and poisons him using coffee laced with peanut oil. Benji then dies from an allergic reaction. Rookie mistake, Benji. Never tell your creepy kidnapper about a deadly, easily exploitable allergy. In the next episode, things are gonna get great with Beck, but Joe's gotta figure out what to do with Benji's body, as it's already started to kinda stink up the place. But instead of solving the immediate problem, Joe eavesdrops on Beck and her friends. He finds out that she's been sleeping with other men, and worse, she referred to him as a maybe. Ouch. Later, Joe invites Beck on a furniture shopping trip, and when they return to her place, she confides in him about her drug-addicted father. They almost have bang-bang relations, but Peach interrupts them as she needs a ride to the emergency room. On the bright side, this gives Joe a chance to burn Benji's body in the woods, where he is then seen by some hikers.
Pro tip of the day, screen your calls when you're trying to burn a body.
Understatement of the century. For some reason, the hikers didn't find that too suspicious, though, and Joe finishes the job. Later, Joe and Beck finally do the deed, and it is not good. In the next episode, Joe is still monitoring all of Beck's text messages, and he's not happy when he sees that Beck is texting somebody named the Captain. in her phone. To add more, he's also sending her money. Joe hates competition, so he follows Beck to a Charles Dickens festival in Nyack. Turns out the captain is Beck's dad. You know, the ones she's been telling everyone is dead? Jeez. In Beck's defense, her dad's new family isn't great. This is awkward. Soon, Beck finds out that Joe is at the festival, and he tells her he stalked social media in order to track her down. Personally, I would have just said it was normal for a bookstore manager to be at a Dickens festival, but you do you, Joe. Later, Beck's father introduces himself to Joe, so now things are even more awkward. Beck then explains to Joe that her dad was just dead to her, not literally dead. But Joe has his own secrets, so he understands. Back in the city, Beck and Joe have relations again, and she tells her friends that it was a lot better this time. Way to go, Joe. In the next episode, Joe and Beck's relationship is going just great. Peach throws a big party at the bookstore to introduce Beck to a famous literary agent called Roger. And Joe hears Roger and Peach saying mean stuff about Beck behind her back. Joe then steals Peach's laptop to find out what her deal is, but it's password protected. And when Peach sees that her computer is missing, she immediately is suspicious of Joe, so she breaks into his place.
What if someone's creeping on you?
Listen to him, Peach, he would know. After Peach leaves, Beck and Joe get into a fight. He tells Beck what he heard Roger and Peach saying, and she storms out of the apartment. Then Joe finally breaks into Peach's laptop and realizes that she is just about as obsessed with Beck as he is. Whoa. A few days later, Roger makes a move on Beck, and he confesses that Peach was talking crap on her. So Beck and Peach get into a huge fight, and Peach fakes a suicide attempt. Boy, these people are a mess. Joe wants Peach out of the way, so he handles the situation in a very Joe way and bashes her head in with a rock. Peach survives the attack. In the next episode, we find out that she's crashing at Beck's place for the time being. That's the opposite of what Joe wanted. Tisk tisk, Joe. Joe tells Beck that he's pretty sure that Peach is in love with her, and she's manipulating her. Soon, Peach takes Beck to her family estate in Greenwich, so Joe goes on a road trip there himself, without them knowing, of course. On the way there, he hits a deer, bashing his head into the steering wheel, and now he's hallucinating his ex-girlfriend, Candace.
Bunny, you okay?
Oh, he's better than okay. He's totally completely normal. Meanwhile, at the Greenwich estate, Peach does with Beck and her old friend Raj. Peach tries to initiate a weird, so Beck leaves the room to text Joe, who is hiding under the bed. Raj and Peach are having a little fun time, little bing bong on. The show is so damn awesome. The next morning, Beck tells Peach that the whole situation is super weird, and she storms out of the estate, and what do you know? Peach finds Joe creepily lurking in her house and realizes he's her stalker, so she pulls a gun on him. They get into a fight, and Peach is killed as they wrestle over the gun. Joe then writes a note on Peach's laptop, leading detectives to believe she killed herself, and that brings Joe's known body count to 2. In the next episode, Joe realizes he needs some serious therapy for all of this, except he tells his therapist that his name is Paul and uses the alias Ronaldo for Beck. You see, things were going great between Beck and Joe after Peach's funeral, until Joe heard that Beck was seeing a therapist, a male therapist. Beck's birthday is coming up, and she tells Joe that she just wants a small, little intimate affair. But Joe being Joe, he throws a huge surprise party instead, and Beck is not happy. They get into a huge fight, and Joe starts to show how jealous and possessive he really is.
Show me your phone.
He is deadly serious, Beck. Later, Joe takes a look at her old phone again and gets suspicious that Beck is cheating on him with her therapist, Dr. Nikki. Joe puts on a baseball cap and follows her around Central Park, but he's quickly caught by Beck. Yikes. Beck dumps him, of course, so Joe makes an appointment with Dr. Nikki. After his pretend therapy session, Joe breaks into his office, opens his laptop, and listens to the recordings of Beck's actual therapy session. Realizing that he had the wrong idea about Dr. Nikki, Joe smashes up Beck's old phone and decides to let her go. But I have a feeling this isn't over quite yet. Candace feels the same way. Uh-oh. On to the next episode. Joe insists that he's in a really good place after his breakup. Now he's sleeping with the neighbor kid's babysitter, Karen, and he's definitely totally super over Beck. See? totally over her. Beck, meanwhile, seems to actually be doing well after the breakup. She wrote a book about Peach's death and got a book deal out of it. Guess that's another thing she has Joe to thank for. But now Beck gets jealous after she creeps on Joe's socials and finds out about Karen. Both Joe and Beck separately confide in Dr. Nikki about each other, but of course Joe is still using an alias. They start texting each other again, and Beck invites him out to work on writing. Yeah, right. Writing. So Joe and Beck are hooking up regularly, without Joe's current girlfriend Karen knowing. Joe and Beck run into each other at a party where Beck tearfully confesses that Joe's good for her, but thinks that he deserves better. Joe breaks up with Karen and rushes over to Beck's place, and the happy couple gets back together. Uh-oh. In this next episode, Joe starts screaming Candace's name in his sleep. Obviously, that makes Beck pretty suspicious, so she asks Joe about it, and he just says that she disappeared from his life one day, and that's about it. Beck still ain't convinced, so she talks to Joe's coworker at the bookstore, Ethan. Another dead end. Desperate for information, Beck digs some more and turns to a mutual acquaintance named Maddie. Jackpot. Maddie doesn't have much to give her either, except for one thing about Candace's brother, Jimmy. We then find out that Candace cheated on Joe with some dude named Elijah, so Joe pushes his ass off a building. Sheesh. After her conversation with Maddie, Beck is freaked out about all this, so she confronts Joe. Bad move. Joe explains himself and shows her Candace's new Instagram account and tells Beck that, look, she just changed her name after moving to Italy, silly. But regardless, Joe is still suspicious about Dr. Nikki. So he confronts him on the street and finds out that Nikki and Beck were sleeping together after all. Uh-oh. Beck admits to the affair and tells Joe that she loves him, so all is forgiven, I guess. The next morning, Beck is talking to Joe's lil neighbor kid, Paco, who mentions that Joe likes to hide stuff in the bathroom ceiling. You see, Joe is actually pretty cool to Paco, and he and Paco have been bonding over old books and abusive step-parents all seasons. Just thought I should let you know. Also, Paco's stepdad, Ron, is kind of an asshole who proudly participates in domestic abuse. He hates it when Paco hangs out with Joe. Anyway, with this brand new information, Beck then goes all Curious George in Joe's bathroom, and she finds her old phone, and Peach's phone, and Benji's phone, and a ton of other disturbing stuff. Maybe he's secretly a dentist. No. Soon after, Joe realizes that Beck found his treasure trove and knocks her out, locking her up in the bookstore basement. Yikes. And now, let's find out if Beck is going to survive the Season 1 finale. Joe and Beck talk through the glass, and Joe swears that he's just been trying to protect her. Beck pieces together that this means her boyfriend probably killed Benji and Peach. Joe then uses this alone time with Beck to tell her more about the elderly bookshop owner, Mr. Mooney. Apparently the guy locked Joe in the glass book cage a bunch when he was young, and taught Joe everything he knows.
I messed up, and you're trying to help me do better.
Later, Joe gets approached by a private investigator digging into what happened with Peach. And this guy is definitely onto Joe, so now that's gonna be a whole thing. Meanwhile, Ron's abuse of Paco's mother has landed her in the hospital, so Joe takes matters into his own hands and kills that bastard. Now that Beck is locked in a room with basically nothing but a typewriter, she starts writing about how she ended up in this insane situation. She then passes her pages back to Joe. She tells him that she's framed Dr. Nikki for the entire situation in her manuscript, saying that they can pin the murders on him, get the private investigator off Joe's back, and live happily ever after. Oh, how romantic. Joe opens up the vault door and kisses her, and to no one's surprise, she stabs him with a piece of the typewriter, giving her a tiny window of opportunity to lock Joe in the glass cage. But you see, Joe had a spare key to get himself out, and he kills Beck. Damn. I really thought she had a chance there. 4 months later, we find out that Joe published Beck's story, pinning all of the murders on Dr. Nikki.
I think we have some unfinished business to talk about.
No, you don't, Candace. Run, get out of that bookstore, girl. Now let's see what sort of murdery shenanigans Joe gets to in Season 2. In this episode, Joe is living in his own personal hell, Los Angeles, California. He's changed his name to Will, hoping that Candace won't track him down after their awkward/threatening encounter. She promises not to kill him, she just wants to destroy him entirely. You know, it's kind of cute. After his big move, Joe, as Will, gets oriented in his new life. He finds a new apartment, gets a new job at a hip grocery store called Anavrin, and even meets a new next-door neighbor kid, Wednesday Addams. Ellie. Joe's been in town for like 5 minutes and swears to himself that he's not going to get obsessed with someone again, and Then he meets Love Quinn, a really talented chef who manages the kitchen in Anavrin. Looks like they're co-workers.
Love, you are not for me.
We've all been there, Joe/Will. A few days later, Ellie gives Joe some social media tips so he can add Love on Facebook, and her Facebook status says, married. That night, Love takes Joe on a food tour of the city and makes him dinner, and she tells him that her husband James died a couple of years ago. Later, Joe heads to a storage unit to check on the real Will. Yeah, he stole his identity, and he's locked him up behind another plexiglass vault. In other news, as the episode ends, we also find out that Joe has been stalking Love since he arrived in town. I guess old habits die hard. In this next episode, we learn how Joe got yet another prisoner behind the plexiglass. Joe found Will through an ad on Craigslist. The real Will sells fake identities. Will tells Joe that this is a process that takes years, but Joe doesn't have years. But he does have a rock. Unfortunately, Joe didn't consider that a guy who sells fake identities on Craigslist might have a sketchy past. Now, Joe is being tracked by this crazy dude named Jasper who Will owes 50 freaking grand. In the meantime, Jasper is willing to accept payment in the form of Joe Pinky Fingers. Jasper does have great manners though, you gotta admit. On their first official date, Love kisses Joe, and now he's having visions of Beck whenever they're together. They were going to get lunch with Love's friends, but Joe has to bail to collect that 50 grand that Will owes. He wants this problem gone ASAP. Of course, he did have a few minutes to eavesdrop on lunch. Luckily for Love and her friends, Joe approves of them for now. After driving all the way up to the valley and securing pills, not cash, from Will's friend, Joe's day goes from bad to worse. Joe tells Love that 40, their grocery store boss, sent him on an errand, and that's why he had to bail on lunch. Unbeknownst to Joe, 40 is also Love's twin brother, so he was quickly caught up in that lie. For now, the two agree to be friends, but I'm guessing Joe has more in mind. Late one night, Joe lures Jasper into the storage unit. Joe still doesn't have 50 grand, so he just kills Jasper. Duh! Then he takes the body to Anavrin, where he cuts up the poor bastard and shoves him in the meat grinder. Couldn't have said it better myself, Joe. In the next episode, Joe is struggling with his attraction to Love, so he tries to become besties with 40. 40 is an aspiring writer, director, producer, and recovering addict, and Anavrin manager. The last one he only got because his rich as hell parents own the joint. After a comedy show, Joe sees Ellie hanging out with a comic named Henderson. Ellie's older sister, a reporter named Delilah, told Joe that Henderson drugged and assaulted her when she was underage. So now Joe wants to protect Ellie, or whatever you want to call Joe's creepy version of protection. For instance, he's already installed spyware on her cell phone. God, this guy's a psycho. Wanting to find dirt on Henderson, Joe sneaks his way into one of his lavish LA parties and runs into 40 on the way. 40 wants to find someone to pitch his movie to, but he's quickly rejected and has a relapse. Joe takes 40 to Love's place to sober up, and Joe and Love bond over being broken souls. And they have some relations after that. Later, 40 spills that Henderson has a super creepy secret relations room somewhere in his house. Jeez! On to the next episode. 40 is really codependent with his twin sister, so Love suggests to Joe that they keep their relationship on the DL for now. In the meantime, Joe takes help from the real Will in order to break into Henderson's creepy relations room.
Oh, how very supervillainy.
Well, that was easy. In the so-called dungeon, Joe finds a box of photos depicting unconscious women, including Delilah, so he drops them at her doorstep. A few days later, Joe finds out that Ellie disabled the spyware he put on her phone. Joe's eavesdropping, on the other hand, still works, so he finds out that Ellie is going over to Henderson's house. So he follows her there. Joe sees Henderson drug Ellie's drink from the other room, so Joe creates a distraction and then drugs his drink. While Ellie is passed out, Joe brings Henderson downstairs and ties him up, hoping to get a confession out of him. Henderson almost escapes, but Joe drags him down the stairs and he's killed. And another one bites the dust. Later that night, Joe releases the real Will from his plexiglass prison, which seems like a really bad idea if you ask me. I mean, I don't want Joe to kill more people, but you know what I mean. Meanwhile, while 40 and Love are out of town, 40 meets an attractive woman named Amy, who's a so-called indie film producer. Wow, that's so weird. She looks exactly like Candace. Oh no, wait, I see what's happening here. In the next episode, Joe and Love are attending a wellness retreat hosted by Love's parents, Dottie and Ray, for their anniversary. LA people, am I right? 40 arrives with a guest as well, and it's Candace. Oh man, this is getting good. Through flashbacks, we find out more about Joe and Candace's breakup. When Candace tried to leave Joe, he knocked her out and tied her up, just so they could talk over a picnic. He promises. Candace tries to run away, and the two get into a scuffle, leading Joe to believe he accidentally killed her. He then buries her in a shallow grave. The police told Candace that since she didn't have any concrete evidence, she'd be better off starting a new life to get away from her ex. In the present, Candace tells Joe that she saw a video of 40's meltdown online and spotted Joe in the background. So she tracked him down to LA, and great news! Amy is working with 40 to develop Beck's book into a movie. Damn, Candace's presence and dysfunctional dynamic of the Quinn family puts Joe on edge, and he gets into a fight with Love. Later, Joe sees Love get slapped by her mother, and they confide in each other about their abusive childhoods. Now they're feeling closer than ever. Back in the city, the cops have done some digging into Henderson's death and believe it to be a murder, not a suicide, as Joe tried to stage it as. In the next episode, Joe, Love, 40, and Candace attend Henderson's funeral. The downer occasion has Love thinking about the last days of her late husband. Love was ready to have a baby, but James was not, and they began fighting before he got sick. While at the retreat, Love catches Candace in a lie. Despite being a so-called indie film producer, Candace has never heard of the very famous agency, United Talent. Suspicious, Love hires a PI to tail her. And when Candace breaks into Joe's apartment later that night, Love is waiting for her with a whole lot of evidence.
Candace Stone?
Kind of what you get for pretending to work for an industry you know absolutely nothing about, Candace. Backed into a corner, Candace tells Love that her boyfriend Will is actually a crazy man named Joe Goldberg who tried to kill her. And Love confronts Joe about his sketchy past, to which Joe convinces her that Candace is totally nuts, and he moved from New York to get away from her. Wow. He really thinks on his feet, huh? Love is still understandably freaked out and dumps him, but 40 convinces her to let Joe keep his job. After the breakup, Joe visits Delilah. She's upset that the accusations against Henderson are never going to be made public, after which Joe comforts her, and they hook up. Aye aye, hey yo! In the next episode, we find out that Love is doing her own rebounding after a breakup with Joe. Love sleeps with her late husband's best friend, Milo. Joe finds out about this when creepily watching her place through his telescope, and he is not happy that she moved on so quickly. Jesus Christ! 40 tells Joe that Milo is a scumbag who's been pining for Love since college. Oh God.
Get back on the horse, start dating around, show Love how free and happy you're living.
40, you're basically telling Ted Bundy to get Tinder. Joe downloads an app for book lovers and goes on a few disappointing dates, but fortunately everyone makes it out alive. A few days later, Joe follows Milo on his hike. He's definitely spiraling. Joe then runs into Love's friend, Gabe, who tells him to stop stalking Milo and cry his feelings out instead. Joe and Delilah hook up again, but this time they're in public and get arrested for it. And to top it off, Delilah's hookup buddy / cop friend, Fincher, won't bail them out because he's jealous of Joe. Luckily, Joe has friends in high places, and 40 uses his connections to bail them out. Not so luckily, Fincher gets bad vibes from Joe and thinks he has something to do with Henderson's death. After they're out of jail, Fincher tries to warn Delilah about Joe, and she becomes suspicious. So she searches Joe's apartment for evidence and finds the storage unit keys. She's very freaked out to see the scary plexiglass vault and his totems, but before Delilah can alert the cops, Joe is tipped off by his nanny cam, and he locks her in the vault.
Can you trust me, Delilah?
No, dude, she definitely can't. At the top of this next episode, Delilah is begging Joe to let her out, but he's been burned before. After some thinking, Joe agrees to let her out tomorrow. Just to be safe, he uses his timed handcuffs to keep her right where he has her. After leaving the storage unit, Joe thinks that his LA life is going to be too complicated and plans to skip town. He'll leave soon and he'll free Delilah when he leaves. Love and Milo have broken up, but Joe doesn't know this, and he's left her a romantic goodbye letter. Unfortunately for Joe, 40 has different plans. He stages a fake kidnapping to force Joe to help him finish his screenplay, with Ellie's help. Side note, Ellie is good at this film screenwriting stuff, and after noticing that, 40 has kind of hired her as his assistant. Okay, back to the story. 40 says that none of them are going to get out of there until the script is complete, so they get to work. After a few hours, Ellie tells 40 they need to start over from scratch. Frustrated, 40 drugs Joe with Ellie to give them some creative inspo, something Joe has never tried in his life, by the way. That night, Love tries to convince Joe to stay in LA, but he's tripping out way too hard to give her an answer. But Love is persistent and FaceTimes Joe to tell him that they have to stay together. After hours upon hours of tripping and going over Beck's memoir, 40 figures out that Dr. Nicky didn't kill Beck. He was framed by a jealous ex-boyfriend. Damn, 40 is actually smart. Hearing this, Joe grabs a shard of glass and prepares to kill him, but he stops when 40 confesses that he murdered his au pair in a blacked out rage as a teenager, all because he was grooming and harassing him, and Joe and 40 have a bonding moment. The next morning, Joe races to his storage unit to let Delilah out, but when he gets there, she's already dead, laying in a puddle of her own blood. How did that happen? In the next episode, Joe is positive that he didn't kill Delilah, despite his own track record. Yeah, he was high, but doing this while being high seems super unlikely to him. That morning, Joe meets back up with 40 to piece together the events from the night before, and 40 has a confession. He hooked up with Candace after dropping off Joe at his storage unit. After viewing a video 40 sent to her the night before, Candace finds the location of the storage unit and that Joe was there. After that, Candace heads to the storage unit only to find Joe standing over Delilah's dead body. Candace locks Joe in the vault and texts Love their location. When she arrives, Joe confesses everything to Love and apologizes to Candace. He even reflects on his life and the first time he killed a man to save his mother. He's ready to accept responsibility, but Love had other plans. These people are nuts. Love returns to Joe and says she handled Candace, and she sure did. Let's see what happens in the season 2 finale. Phew, Love has a whole lot to confess to Joe. She says that she meticulously studied his life to ensure they'd be together. Not only did Love kill Candace and Delilah to protect Joe, but she killed au pair too, to protect her twin bro 40. Hearing all that, Joe is really disappointed in Love. Psh! And his innocent version of her is shattered.
I'm sorry, it's very hard to think clearly in the river of crazy.
Not so fun when someone does it to you, is it, Joe? Love has a whole plan to get them out of this jam. They'll frame Ellie for Henderson's murder and stage Delilah's death as a suicide. Since Love's family basically owns the LAPD, they can still get Ellie off scot-free, and Joe finally starts to have some empathy for Beck. After Love gets Joe out of the cage, he almost kills her with the handcuffs, but she tells him that she's pregnant. Damn. Meanwhile, 40 has finished his script and has figured out that Joe is totally nuts and that his sister is in danger. He does an impromptu prison interview with Dr. Nicky, but Nicky suddenly found God and doesn't care about leaving prison. Months later, Love and Joe are still together. Joe sends Ellie away with money before CPS can take her away. 40 has actually gotten sober this time and confronts Joe at Anavren with a gun. Before he can blast Joe's brains out, 40 is shot by Fincher. Love's family uses their connections to pin Henderson and Candace's death on 40 and halt any further investigation. After that, Joe and Love move to a nice house in the suburbs to raise a family, but before they can live happily ever after, Joe sees someone interesting next door. Oh my hell, does this guy not know when to stop?
See you soon, neighbor.
In the picturesque suburbs of Madre Linda, Love gave birth to her child with Joe, a healthy baby boy named Henry. And Joe is not happy to be a boy dad and struggles to bond with the kiddo, straining his marriage. But unlike brothers and ex-girlfriends, habits die hard. Joe has a new obsessive infatuation with the next-door neighbor, a real estate agent named Natalie. Natalie is married to a richy-rich tech mogul named Matthew. Love, meanwhile, begins a passive-aggressive friendship with an Instagram influencer, or should I say momfluencer, named Sherry Conrad. Classic suburban couple shenanigans. One day, Joe gets caught creeping on Natalie, but she's actually pretty into it and invites him over for a wine night. Pretty into it might have been an understatement. Joe starts having second thoughts and returns home to have a little bingo boingo bing bang with his wife for the first time in months. Nice. Keep it in the family. The next night, Joe and Love attend one of Sherry's parties. Love flies into a jealous rage after talking to Natalie, believing that Joe is cheating, and her suspicions are soon confirmed when she discovers a box of mementos that Joe stole from her. Uh-oh. Love falls back into old habits and murders Natalie in the basement of the bakery she just purchased. But that's the last time, she swears, so she names the bakery a Fresh Tart. Oh. In the next episode, Joe and Love decide to try couples therapy. They can't really talk about all the murders they've done, so I don't think that's gonna help too much. Love befriends a flirty college student named Theo, who's also Matthew's stepson, and Joe befriends a flirty librarian named Marianne. In flashbacks, we learn how Joe and Love, but mostly Joe, disposed of Natalie's body. Luckily, this is not Joe's first murder rodeo and buries her in the woods.
I don't even recognize myself.
Really? 'Cause my POV, this is pretty typical Joe stuff, Joe. After they get rid of the body, Love, Joe, and Henry attend the birthday party of Sherry's twin boys, and Joe learns that everyone in the suburb wears GPS rings that track their health, which means that they have to dig up Natalie's body, remove the ring, and put the body somewhere else. Damn it! So all of that is what brought this crazy couple to therapy, but these guys must have a damn good therapist because they reconnect and promise to never commit murder ever again. Got it, guys? No more murder. We will see how long that actually lasts, though. At the top of the next episode, we find out that Natalie's death is attracting a lot more media attention. Meanwhile, Henry gets the measles and is rushed to the hospital. While there, Joe and Love decide to use Natalie's bloody scarf to pin the murder on Matthew, Natalie's tech mogul husband, who everyone's already very suspicious of. That afternoon, Joe breaks into Matthew's house to drop off the scarf, but Joe's mom never vaccinated him either, and he catches the measles from Henry and passes out. Uh-oh, Joe wakes up with Matthew nursing him back to health and being like, "Dude, why are you in my house?" Joe brushes it off, saying it was just a measles fever dream, and he convinces Matthew to make a statement to the press. Later, Henry is brought home from the hospital, and Joe and Love burn the scarf, not wanting to pin Natalie's murder on an innocent man. The next day, a neighbor, Gil, visits Love in the bakery and confesses that his kids gave Henry the measles. Love is not too happy about this. So much for a fresh tart. In the next episode, Joe and Love have yet another problem on their hands. While Gil is unconscious, Joe and Love lock him in the plexiglass cage, but he's still alive. But Joe thinks that Gil will report the assault, so Love puts her family PI on him to get some blackmail. She finds out that Gil's son is a predator and that Gil's wife has been paying off the girls' families to keep them quiet. Gil, however, didn't know anything about this and he himself. Gil, you have no idea how much you just ruined their day.
Joseph Quinn Goldberg!
But Joe and Love are still creative as ever. Love plants a murder weapon in the forest with Gil's fingerprints on it, while Joe moves the body back to his residence, staging the scene to look like a suicide. And their plan works. Months pass, and everyone believes that Gil felt so guilty over murdering Natalie that he killed himself. Problem probably solved. In the next episode, about 6 months have passed since the incident with Gil, but now they're bored, even telling their therapist as much. The therapist suggests to the happy-ish couple that they make some new friends and some new hobbies together. In the meantime, Joe is worried about his growing obsession with Marianne. Yeah, that flirty librarian. But he's trying to be normal with his happy life, until he catches Love having a private conversation with Theo and gets suspicious about their relationship. After a little digging, Joe coaxes out of Love that she's been paying for Theo's drunken Uber trips from time to time. Joe punches a wall in a rage, so Love convinces him to go on a weekend hunting retreat with Sherry's husband, Carrie, this ultra-masculine, fitness-obsessed, biohacking entrepreneur. That night, Carrie provokes Joe into fighting him, and Joe pushes Carrie off a cliff. So I guess that means Joe wins. Carrie's alive though, and now he deeply respects Joe.
You are one fine specimen of a man, Joe.
Not really, weirdos. Meanwhile, Theo calls Love and asks her to bail him out of jail. He got arrested for driving drunk on a scooter. Then they have some, relations in the woods. Is this legal? Let's see what happens in this next episode. Probably something scandalous. So Joe has started stalking Melanie and finds out that she's a recovering addict in a brutal custody battle with her ex-husband and local reporter Ryan. One day at the library, Joe catches Marianne and Ryan fighting, and Joe takes it upon himself to intervene. Marianne does not take his heroism well and starts screaming at him. Meanwhile, Theo still has it really bad for Love. Aw, he's been doing the boombox thing from Say Anything. Theo tells Love that his stepdad has gone totally crazy conspiracy and is still hunting for his wife's real killer. So Joe and Love agree it's best to keep Theo in their circle. Back at the library, the fire alarm malfunctions, and Marianne calls Joe to have him help her salvage the books. While working, they open up about each other's personal struggles, and they then kiss in the rain. Well, busted fire alarm rain. Here we go again. In the next episode, neither Love nor Joe can stop thinking about their crushes. At Love's request, Theo breaks into his stepdad's office to gather info. Meanwhile, Love's parents are getting a divorce, and Dottie tells her that Ray got both Anavrin and her vineyard. She's not happy, to say the least. Love, on the other hand, is determined to prove to herself that she didn't marry the wrong guy, so she tries to initiate foreplay with Joe, but he has other stuff on his mind. So Love hooks up with Theo again. Meanwhile, Marianne tells Joe that they can't get involved with each other because, morals. But Joe doesn't like that answer, so he devises a plan to push Ryan into having a relapse, so Marianne will get custody of her daughter again. Unfortunately, though, it turns out that Ryan was never sober and he uses a ton of so Joe giving him more doesn't affect him at all. And even worse, Ryan catches Joe following him.
Lurking in the back of meetings, pretending like you're invisible.
You're getting sloppy, Joe. Try going undercover in something other than a baseball cap. Later at a library fundraiser gala, Sherry tells Love that she and Carrie want to try swinging with her and Joe. Aye, but Love is saved by the bell. She finds out that Dottie just baby-napped Henry and has burned down the vineyard that Ray got in the settlement. Dang. Seeing this, Love does the most reasonable thing we've ever seen her do, and she sends her mother to rehab. The next morning, Dottie is even more upset and tells Joe something super duper important about Love's first husband, James. I don't know. To me, this just confirms that they are soulmates. On to the next episode. Joe agrees to Love's offer of swinging with the Conrads, hoping it will expose their marriage as broken. Then he'll be able to pursue his real love, Marianne. In the meantime, Joe agrees to testify as a character witness in a custody hearing for her. Meanwhile, Matthew catches Theo searching through his computer files, and now he's suspicious that Love had something to do with his wife's murder, which she did, so it's safe to say that this guy ain't dumb. Later, the Conrads come over for a fun night of fun. See? Fun. While they're having sex, Love can tell that Joe is thinking about someone else. She pulls him aside and they get into an argument. And Love ends up screaming that she murdered Natalie while the Conrads are still upstairs. The Conrads try to leave, but Joe and Love are pros by now. Carrie and Sherry are knocked out and locked in, you guessed it, the plexiglass vault. This whole escapade makes Love and Joe realize they're turned on by violence. Oh man, I could have told them that. Let's see how Joe and Love wriggle their way out of this jam. Joe is cleaning up from their little party last night and finds a gun in one of Carrie's bags, but he thinks it's more important to go confront Marianne right now. So that's exactly what he does. The judge was friends with Ryan, so now he's taking their daughter to New Jersey. Joe tells Marianne about the murder he committed, and then they have a heart-to-heart. I mean, he only told her about that one single murder he did as a kid trying to defend his mom. Otherwise, I think her reaction would have been a lot different. Anyway, Joe and Marianne then finally hook up. Afterwards, she tells Joe that she's going to move to New Jersey to be with her daughter. So Joe decides to go on a new side quest to kill Ryan, because he'd rather have her stay here. Hey, maybe finish killing off the couple in your basement first? Later, Joe follows Ryan around some more, but he gets caught, which leads to a fight where Ryan gets stabbed to death. Meanwhile, while Sherry is locked up, she suggests to Love that she publishes an expose on her blog, telling everyone that Matthew has been spying on everyone in Madre Linda. Love thinks that's a great idea, so now the whole suburb is in an uproar. Matthew's lawyers tell him to delete all of the footage so they don't get sued into oblivion, but not before Theo snags a backup of it. And then Theo gets curious and takes a close look at the footage, and he sees that Joe left the bakery in Natalie's car, meaning Matthew wasn't nuts. Theo goes to the bakery to tell Love that her husband is a psycho, only to find Sherry and Carrie in the cage. Theo is super freaked out, but still thinks that Love is totally innocent. Love shows up at the bakery and knocks him out with a fire extinguisher. Poor, sweet, stupid bastard. And now let's find out what happens in the season 3 finale. Love tells Joe what happened to Theo and has a great idea to fix it. They should have another baby.
I'm actually speechless.
Me too, Joe. Me too. Meanwhile, Joe finds out that Theo is alive in the basement and takes him up to the hospital, hoping to pin the whole thing on Love. Meanwhile, Love finds Joe's bloody shirt from his encounter with Ryan and realizes that her husband is infatuated with Marianne. Took you long enough. Love confronts Joe at dinner, where he asks for a divorce. But Love wants to have the last word. She confesses to accidentally killing James because it was her first time using aconite to poison someone, but now she knows she's good at it. Whoopsies. Love uses the aconite poison to paralyze Joe, and then uses his phone to contact Marianne to lure her over to kill her. But first she's got to fulfill a cupcake order. That grind never stops, girl. Elsewhere, Matthew is worried about Theo and thinks he might be sneaking around with Love again. He goes into their house only to find Joe totally incapacitated besides his eyes. Joe manages to communicate to Matthew that Theo is at the hospital and he leaves. After Love is back from her cupcake run, Marianne shows up. Love tells her that Joe killed Ryan and she's horrified. Love is about to kill her when Marianne's daughter Juliet interrupts. Love isn't willing to kill a mom in front of her kid. Aww. So instead she tells Marianne to take Juliet and GTFO. Marianne and Juliet leave and Love prepares to kill Joe. She stands over him with a knife, but Joe pulls a 180 and injects her with a lethal dose of aconite. He saw her growing wolfsbane, aka aconite, in the garden, and took an antidote earlier to prevent this very thing from happening. The bastard was one step ahead. After he kills Love, Joe stages the house to look like a murder-suicide. He writes a note framing Love for all the murders that happened in the suburb and sets the house on fire. He then drops Henry off at a co-worker's house before flying off to Paris with a new identity and 2 less toes. For the people of Madre Linda, Joe Goldberg is dead, officially. I'm surprised it took them that long to make a Sweeney Todd reference. But on the bright side, Sherry and Carrie really worked through their while locked up. They realized that Joe and Love never trusted each other and broke out of the cage with the hidden spare key. 2 accidental bullet wounds later, the Conrads' relationship is stronger than ever, and they're even doing TED Talks. Let's dive into season 4. In a flashback, Joe chases down Marianne in London. Literally. Poor girl. She calls him a murderer and that hurts Joe's feelings, so he decides to give her some space for now. Soon after, Joe is approached by Elliot, a PI by Love's father, Ray. Elliot offers Joe a totally new identity in exchange for killing Marianne in order to tie up loose ends. Instead of doing that, Joe just swipes off a necklace of her to make it look like he did. Back in the present, Joe is living in London with a new identity, Professor Jonathan Moore, and a brand new beard. Joe swears to himself that his only obsessions are books from now on, but we all know that won't last. Joe lives across from his colleague Malcolm and his girlfriend Kate. Sure enough, Joe becomes obsessed with Kate and starts stalking her, but luckily for Kate, Joe is following her when she gets mugged, and he gets to play the hero by saving the day.
Not my circus, not my monkeys, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Just keep telling yourself that, big guy. Later, Fancy Malcolm invites Joe to a fancy party with his fancy friends as thanks. While there, Joe meets a lot of fancy people and also befriends author and mayoral hopeful Reese Montrose. Then, Joe has a few too many drinks and wakes up the next morning only to find Malcolm stabbed, bloody, and very dead on his frickin' table. So that's what a murderer's hangover looks like. Joe starts freaking out, believing he blacked out and got up to his old tricks. After a very gross scene of Joe dismembering Malcolm's body, Kate invites him to dinner, and when he arrives, he gets a series of texts from Malcolm's real killer thanking him for disposing of the body. This is the most terrifying game of Clue I've ever witnessed. In episode 2 of this season, Joe is trying to figure out who his new murderous pen pal is.
Loner by nature. You're a stalker.
Looks like someone can't take what he dishes out. Joe is then invited to an art exhibition founded by Kate, curated by influencer socialite Lady Phoebe, and featuring the work of Simon, the artist's son of a tech entrepreneur. Yeah, Joe is suddenly chummy with these fancy people after Malcolm's party. In the meantime, Joe breaks into Malcolm's office to see if the guy had any enemies. No signs of enemies, but he does find a ledger of gambling debts. At first, Joe is on to Phoebe's boyfriend, American expat and expensive club owner, Adam. But after following him around, it seems like the guy isn't a murderer, just the dude who likes to be pissed on by busboys. You do you, Adam. While he's snooping, Phoebe's bodyguard, Vic, catches Joe sneaking around and looking shady, but lets him off with a warning for now. At the exhibition, a random woman destroys Simon's artwork, leading Joe to believe he has other secrets, and he does. Turns out, lazy-ass Simon isn't an artist at all. He's been stealing the artwork of his assistants, but he's not the murderer. You can tell because he's dead now too. After a long night of not solving crimes, Joe returns home to a redecorated apartment. Looks like Joe's pen pal knows about his entire murderous past. On to the next episode. Joe's pen pal sends Malcolm's finger to the press, and the media suddenly starts calling them the Eat the Rich Killer. As this happens, one of Joe's students, Nadia, is particularly upset, and Joe deduces that she was sleeping with Malcolm. Later at the funeral, Joe gets a text from his pen pal ordering him to kill Kate, but Joe is determined to leave his deadly past in the past. So he begins following Kate around to protect her. Oh great, this again. Eventually, Kate opens up to him about Malcolm, and they hook up in a secret garden. Over the next few days, Joe continues to follow Kate, and eventually gets caught by Vic, Phoebe's bodyguard. Vic finds Malcolm's ring planted on Joe, and a struggle ensues. So Joe kills him. I think this is the longest Joe's gone without murdering someone on screen. Now Joe's really pissed off and tries to convince his killer pen pal to meet him in person. In the meantime, Phoebe invites Joe to Sundry House, where the police are waiting to question him about Malcolm's murder. Uh-oh. In the next episode, Phoebe invites Joe and the other fancy socialites to a country manor for a weekend getaway. While there, Phoebe tries to seduce Joe, but he turns her down. Phoebe then confesses that she's afraid her boyfriend Adam doesn't love her. Adam, meanwhile, tells Joe that he plans to propose, mostly to wipe away his mounting debts. These rich people have some really messed up ideas of fun, including Kate's Oxford friend, Gemma, who uses the workers as lawn ornaments. She seems pleasant. Joe begins to suspect Kate's childhood friend, Rold, is the pen pal murderer, so he's pretty nervous when the guy invites him on a quick hunting stroll. Later, we see that Rold is obsessed with Kate and lashes out at her for acting like she has a moral compass and isn't a super rich socialite. After that, Kate confides in Joe, saying her father is a multi-billionaire and one of the most powerful men on the planet. But she hates the guy due to his evil ways of doing business, and has been estranged from him since she was 20. That night, Rold thinks that Joe's the killer, so naturally he shoves him out of a second-story window, but Joe survives. This guy's like a freaking cockroach. He then hears a scream and finds Kate kneeling over Gemma's body with a knife in her hand. Well, that's suspicious. Let's see what happens in this next episode. Despite how it looks, Kate swears she didn't kill Gemma. Joe is like, no problem, it happens to the best of us, and helps her get rid of the body. Kate notices that Joe is weirdly good at disposing of corpses, and he confesses that he got rid of Malcolm's body previously and now believes someone is trying to frame him. Joe is finishing the job in the barn when Rold finds him. Rold brings Joe to the others and accuses him of being the killer, and the evidence is pretty damning. These guys then generously agree to give Joe a head start to escape, while Rold pursues him with a shotgun.
Sit tight. I'm going peasant hunting.
I never thought I'd be on Joe's side, but geez, these people. Joe overpowers Rold in the woods, but then he's captured and placed in a dungeon by Reese, the actual killer. We then find out that Reese came from poverty and tells Joe that he's been doing all of the murdering because he hates the rich. Reese tells Joe to kill Rold so they can frame him for the murders, and Joe refuses, so Reese sets the dungeon on fire and leaves him to die. But our cockroach here gets himself free before releasing Rold. The pair are then rescued by Kate. Joe then vows to bring down Reese, and Reese officially announces his candidacy for mayor of London. In the next episode, Reese breaks into Joe's apartment again and tells him he needs to find someone to frame for all of the murders. If he won't, then Reese is going to pin the whole thing on Joe. Just to be sure Joe's motivated to do so, Reese puts Simon's ear in his freezer. Just be sure to put it in the microwave before you eat it, Joe. We then see Kate hold another gallery fundraiser, and Joe scopes the place out for someone to pin the murders on. Phoebe gets a strange feeling that she has a stalker and tells this to Joe. Well, it turns out Phoebe was onto something because she's soon held captive by Dawn, a working-class woman with a parasocial obsession with her. This gives Joe an idea. He sticks the frozenish ear in Dawn's bag before the police arrive, and she's then arrested for the Eat the Rich murders. Nadia, yeah, that one student of Joe's, sees the arrest happen and becomes suspicious of her professor. Later, Adam finally pops the question to Phoebe, but Dawn told her about Adam's financial problems, so Phoebe turns him down. Good for you, girl. A few days days later, Kate and Joe confess their feelings for each other, and Kate even promises to not ask any questions about his sketchy past. Bad call, Kate. Reese, meanwhile, breaks into Joe's apartment again and gives him another task: kill his political rival, Tom Lockwood, who also happens to be Kate's dad. Uh-oh. In the next episode, Joe and Kate are officially dating, and Joe agrees to accompany her to meet her father while he's in town.
Remember, he's pure evil, and you're going to love him.
Don't oversell him, Kate. Lockwood tells Joe that he knows that he's, well, Joe. When Joe and Lockwood get a moment alone, Lockwood tells him that Reese's memoir is largely fabricated, and he will soon publish an expose. This leads to Joe considering switching teams and burning Reese to the ground. Joe then baits Reese into coming over so he can record him admitting to the fraud, and Reese reveals that he kidnapped Marianne and will kill her if Joe doesn't take down Lockwood. But Lockwood offers a different pitch: find and kill Reese, or he'll reveal everything about his past. Yikes. Joe goes to Reese's cottage to tie him up and torture him, and then he asks where Marianne is, but Reese acts all different and claims to have no idea what's going on, so Joe strangles him to death. Meanwhile, Nadia still thinks something is up with Joe, so she breaks into his apartment and finds a hidden key that leads to a secret room. Oh my hell! Does Joe ever let up with this? Now, for the next episode, I want to start with some flashbacks to fill in the blanks, because this season has just been weird and wild. So it turns out that Joe had been hallucinating a version of Reese before he killed the real Reese. Yeah, those texts and pen pal stuff, all bull down the toilet. You see, Marianne was going to leave London after Joe found her, but he kidnapped her and locked her in a plexiglass cage. After locking up Marianne, Joe had a psychotic break and started believing he was Reese. He was kind of reading Reese's book at the time, so Joe then eventually stopped bringing food to Marianne, having forgotten that he kidnapped her in the first place. Back in the present, Joe's imaginary version of Reese fills in the gaps. Joe never met Reese at all, and he was just deeply obsessed with the mayoral hopeful's life story of leaving poverty and finding redemption.
You are full-fat, extra sugar, deep-fried insane Joe Goldberg.
Ain't that the truth? You see, it was all Joe since the beginning. Joe was the one who committed all those murders, not just Vic, but Malcolm, Simon, Gemma, and the real Reese, all to feed Joe's hero fantasy. Meanwhile, Marianne begs Nadia to not call the police, believing Joe will just find her again, and Nadia promises to return with a plan. After a few chats with his imaginary friend, Joe remembers where he put the key to Marianne's cage, and he arrives just as Nadia is laying out her plan to Marianne. In the next episode, Nadia has to hide from Joe while he enters the secret room. Joe promises to let Marianne out, later, of course, because right now, he and Kate have an engagement party to go to. This guy. Anyway, we see then that Phoebe has decided to marry Adam after all, only because she's suffering from PTSD after being kidnapped by Dawn, and has completely lost it. After a few conversations with Joe and Kate, Phoebe has a mental breakdown and is committed to psychiatric care, but Adam tries to hook up with some and they kill him, so marriage over. The next day, Lockwood asks Kate to take over the company. Also, those they were actually hitmen sent by Lockwood. Jeez. Kate is really upset with her dad about this, and he confesses that he's been doing this kind of thing her entire life to keep her safe so she can take the reins of the family business.
I want you to drive careful though, okay?
Love you too, Dad. Meanwhile, Joe finds out that Marianne is losing custody of Juliet, her daughter, all because Joe locked her up and made her go MIA. Marianne is devastated, and Joe takes Valium to try to stop the hallucination of Reese. Instead, he has a nightmare where Gemma, Love, and Beck tell him that the only way to stop the cycle is to kill himself. When Joe wakes up, he goes to free Marianne, only to find out that she overdosed on the pills he gave her. Damn. Let's see what's in store for the season 4 finale. So Joe disposes of Marianne's body in a park, and Nadia confides in her boyfriend, Edward, after Reese's murder goes public. She and Marianne plotted to fake her death by replacing the drugs Joe gave her with beta blockers, to just make her look like she died. She never lost custody of Juliet either, all a part of the plan. Then Marianne raises from the dead, making her the second of Joe's victims to do so. Meanwhile, Kate tells Joe that her father has been fixing her problems her entire life and expresses her fear of never escaping his control. Joe assures Kate that Lockwood did not send him. Later, frustrated with him trying to pull the strings in his and Kate's life, Joe ties up Lockwood, who gives him a lecture. Lockwood says he came from nothing and is just a survivor who bubble-wrapped the world for his daughter. Obviously, Joe was tired of hearing it, so Lockwood suffocates to death. And Joe attempts the next morning after framing a bodyguard for the crime. Sometime after, Joe wakes up in the hospital with Kate. She tells him that she inherited all of her father's assets and covered up Joe's involvement in Reese's death. Joe then tells her that he isn't Jonathan Moore, but a regular guy named Joe Goldberg. Back in Joe's apartment, Nadia is on the phone with Edward while she looks for something, anything, to prove he committed the crimes. Then Nadia finds his creepy souvenir box and snaps a few photos. But Joe catches her, and then he murders Edward and frames Nadia for the crime. As the season ends, all of Kate and Joe's rich friends are fine, because, you know, they're super rich. Phoebe ran away and is an elementary school teacher in Thailand now, but the others are mostly doing the same old crap. Marianne escaped to Paris with Juliet. Kate and Joe have moved back to New York City, having used their resources to wipe his record clean and rehabilitate his image as a victim of a violent partner. Let's see what's in store for the final season of You. It's been 3 years since the events of season 4, and we're back in New York. Joe finally shaved his beard, and his image is also squeaky clean, thanks to his rich wife. Also, he manages to get Henry back, and the kid lives with his dad and Kate now. I'm sure these abrupt changes won't traumatize him for life. One evening at a fancy company party, Joe gets some hot goss by his brother-in-law, Teddy. Real quick, Teddy is Kate's half-brother from an affair that their father refused to acknowledge, but now that Tom's dead, Teddy is basically Kate's second-in-command at the company. So take that, Dad. Anyway, Teddy tells Joe that a hit piece is about to run on Kate on a popular politician, which will uncover the details of a business deal she made years ago that gave a lot of kids cancer. Obviously, the article would destroy Kate's otherwise spotless reputation, and Joe isn't about that. So Joe and Teddy question Kate's twin half-sisters, Reagan and Maddie, but it wasn't them. Oh, sorry, if you can't tell the difference between Reagan and Maddie, just remember Reagan is the company's CFO and SCB, stone cold bitch. Maddie, on the other hand, always looks like she's about to have a breakdown. Nevertheless, Joe searches Maddie's phone and discovers that she, Reagan, and the company board member called Bob are planning a vote of no confidence against Kate. Uh-oh. Later, Joe is feeling nostalgic since he's back in his favorite city, so he visits Mooney's. Now that he's a freaking billionaire, thanks to his businesswoman wife, Joe actually owns Mooney's. He had planned to sell it, but is having second thoughts. That night, Joe fantasizes about murdering Bob and writes about it, but Kate catches him. Who uses typewriters anyway? She's understandably weirded out by Joe's murder fantasies and returns home. As he's about to lock up, Joe meets Bronte. So Bronte has been sneaking in to borrow books, and Joe is suddenly charmed by her. As I'm sure you know by now, this won't end well. The next day, Kate confronts Bob about the vote. He confirms that he leaked the information to the press and knows about her involvement in Reese's death. But Bob is no match for Joe Goldberg. Joe murders him later that night and stages the events as a suicide. Joe then returns to Mooney's and sees Bronte again, and he decides to not sell the place and offers her a job. But before they can open up shop, Joe has to build something in the basement.
It's all just you.
Say what you want about Joe, but he's consistent. In the next episode, Joe confesses to himself that he feels exhilarated and more alive than ever after doing another murder. Joe promises Kate that he burned his fan fiction about killing Bob, seeing as it would be kind of bad for the police to find that in their investigation. But Joe is a freak, so he didn't actually do that. Later that day, Joe and Kate get called into a meeting with the school because Henry decked a girl and broke her nose. And the little girl happens to be Reagan's daughter, Gretchen. Great, more family drama. Henry is suspended from school, and he tells his dad that the fight occurred because Gretchen told him that his mom was a killer. Close, Gretchen, but it's his dad. That night, Kate arranges a dinner with Reagan and her husband Harrison so the family can hash things out, and it's not going great. Reagan insists that Henry change schools and get some therapy, which is totally fair, but then she goes on to say that she thinks Kate had Uncle Bob killed. Smart gal. Teddy quickly jumps to Kate's defense, lying and saying that he saw the non-existent security footage of Bob's suicide. But Reagan won't let up, insisting that she's going to come for everything Kate and Joe have. However, Henry comes in and shuts the conversation down. Meanwhile, Bronte gets curious about what's in the basement and teaches herself how to pick a lock so she can check it out. But she accidentally locks herself in the plexiglass cage. After the family leaves, Joe and Kate have a debrief. Joe's like, I have an idea, let's kill Reagan. But Kate isn't feeling it, thinking getting Henry therapy is probably the better call. Joe gets very defensive about the suggestion and storms out of the room. bedroom. He then sees a notification on his phone that there's movement in the basement of Mooney's. After getting there, Joe lets Bronte out of the cage and fires her. Late one night, Joe sneaks into Reagan's office to kidnap her, but she's getting freaky with Harrison, so first he's gotta lock him in a supply closet. Then Joe knocks Reagan unconscious before locking her up in the cage. The next morning, Kate gets a call from Reagan saying she's gonna press charges on Henry, meaning Joe locked up the wrong twin and Maddie was sleeping with her twin sister's hubby. Yikes. On to the next episode. Joe has no clue what to do with Maddie. She pieces together pretty quickly that Joe is a murderous sociopath who killed Bob. So now he's got a big problem on his hands. To combat that, Joe tries to blackmail Maddie, saying he'll tell Reagan about her affair with Harrison. But a small affair like that doesn't have as much weight as killing Bob. Meanwhile, Joe has rehired Bronte and given her an apartment above the store, and she is really being flirty with him. While at a literary open mic, Bronte is publicly humiliated by an ex-boyfriend named Clayton. Joe, of course, tells the guy to back off, and he's already becoming obsessed with her, which we usually know that doesn't end well. Elsewhere, Teddy uncovers that Reagan is embezzling money, and when Kate goes to confront her sister, Reagan is devastated. She already pieced together that Maddie was sleeping with her husband. Back at home, Kate tells Joe that she's haunted over what they did to Bob. She wants his help, but isn't willing to kill anymore. Totally fair, if you ask me. Late at night, Reagan goes live posing as her sister, confessing to the affair and saying she'll step down from the board, and this gives Joe an idea.
How would you like to become your sister?
In the next episode, Maddie hates Joe's idea. I mean, twins replacing each other? Come on. Joe is super annoyed that Maddie doesn't think his plan will work, but she just doesn't have the confidence to impersonate Reagan, who she believes to be the superior twin. That is so sad. Meanwhile, Kate demands Reagan's resignation, threatening to go public about the embezzlement. Reagan counters that saying that she did a bit of investigative work herself, and figured out that Joe is her little assassin. Reagan says that if Kate doesn't resign, she'll go public about the deaths of Reese and Bob. Kate tells Joe that Reagan knows everything, and seeing no other way out, Kate wants to resign as CEO. Joe is like, hey, I have a better idea. Let's kill her. But Kate is still not in the mood for any more murder, saying she despises the dark side of herself and the dark side of Joe. Later, Joe, who finally can afford a disguise other than a ball cap, breaks into Reagan's house to kidnap her. And he's positive that it's not Maddie this time because, you know, he already has Maddie. A fight breaks out. Joe dodges a few bowling balls before knocking out Reagan and locking her up with her twin sister. Joe refuses to let Maddie out, saying he'll only do so if she kills Reagan. Otherwise, he'll kill them both. Can you believe this asshole still thinks he's the good guy? Meanwhile, Bronte is snooping around the stores and finds Joe's typewritten fantasies about her, and she's pretty into it. At the official Mooney's reopening party, Clayton harasses Bronte, so Joe threatens him and kicks him out of the store. Damn. At the cage, when Reagan comes to, she and Maddie get into a heated argument. Not just about the affair, but about their entire relationship and sibling rivalry dynamic.
You are expendable, Maddie.
Well, that's not very nice. Maddie musters up the courage to murder her sister, so Joe lets her out and Maddie takes her twin's place the next morning and resigns from CFO while posing as Reagan. Kate can't tell that Maddie's replaced Reagan, so you'd think Joe would count this as a win. But no, he doesn't think that Kate is sufficiently thankful for his efforts, and now believes his marriage is broken. This guy's just finding excuses to hop from one woman to another. Later, he goes back to the bookstore and hooks up with Bronte. Yeah, he just wanted an excuse. In the next episode, Kate realizes that maybe she should have done a background check on Joe before getting married to him, but better late than never, I guess. She sends a private investigator after him and learns about his affair. Kate also learns about Marianne's disappearance and begins to wonder if Joe killed her and his ex-wife Love. We then see Joe meeting up with Maddie, who is really struggling to keep up appearances as Reagan, and he promises to cover up the murder of Reagan with the help of his old pal Will Bettelheim. Yeah, that guy. Back at the bookstore, Joe finds a note from Bronte saying she's left town. Yeah, the woman feels guilty after sleeping with a married man, but Joe's day goes from bad to worse when he finds out that Kate is hiding a hunting knife in her bed. Yeah, she's caught on to your whole serial killer thing, dude. Kate tells Joe that she wants a divorce, and Joe suspects that Clayton has something to do with Bronte's disappearance. So he goes and he does what any reasonable person would do. Couldn't he have just become a rock climber instead of doing all of the murder? While in Clayton's apartment, Joe gets a call from Bronte, and he tracks her down to a house in Atlantic Beach. After a quick misunderstanding where Bronte tases Joe thinking he was a rando, Joe tells Bronte he's getting a divorce, so now they can just be in love. Meanwhile, Kate goes to Reagan's apartment to confront her, but she unexpectedly finds Maddie having a total breakdown instead. Maddie hides in the bathroom, giving it her all as she pretends to be both twins at once, but it doesn't work very well. She then admits to Kate that Joe forced her to kill Reagan, and Teddy is not happy that he's being dragged into this mess. Back at the beach house, Joe hears Bronte and Clayton fighting, so Joe just fully snaps the guy's neck. But then two of Bronte's friends, Dominique and Phoenix, burst into the room, pointing a phone camera at him. Jesus, this ain't a prank video, kids. Dominique says they just caught Joe live on TikTok committing murder. Oh my hell, somebody finally got his ass. In the next episode, Joe is arrested. About damn time. And while we uncover a lot of new stuff, Bronte tells a detective that she was friends with Beck when they were students, and she never believed that her therapist murdered her. So, Bronte met a group of people online who felt similarly, including Clayton, who is Dr. Nikki's son. They investigated Joe for years until his apparent death, but when he came back into public life, Bronte moved to New York City to be with the others and continue their investigation. Damn! Clayton and Dominique thought it would be best to stay on the fringes of Joe's life, but Bronte went rogue and she broke into the bookstore where she accidentally met him. Bronte then told her friends that she thinks she can trick Joe into falling in love with her, but soon her own feelings became real and Bronte began to suspect that their conspiracies were, well, conspiracies. What, like you've never caught feelings for a handsome serial killer? While Bronte was out of town, Clayton played the role of jealous ex well and posted stuff on his socials to lure Joe to the beach house. But now, Bronte's all like, Joe only killed Clayton out of self-defense. Damn, girly. Meanwhile, Joe is bailed out of jail by Kate's lawyers, of course. But when Joe signs the paperwork, he also has to turn over custody of Henry to Kate. Then someone better call the fire department, and it looks like Joe found the hidden camera stashed in the apartment above Mooney's. In the next episode, Joe is the talk of the town, in the worst way possible, and he really wants to see his son all of a sudden, but his very good lawyer tells him to be patient. After all, Bronte and the others aren't very credible, and Joe is a handsome, rich guy, but Joe is anything but cool and begins tracking Henry with a book he snuck a GPS device into. Joe sneaks into Teddy's house to talk with Henry, but Teddy does not want to have the serial killer for a brother-in-law, so he says they aren't having visitors right now and points a knife at him so he'll go away. This leads to a fight, and Joe is ripped away from Henry by bodyguards. Meanwhile, Bronte's friends want to come forward with a takedown of Joe, but she refuses to be in it. Joe's really got his teeth sunk in her. Dominique and Phoenix make a video without Bronte, outlining all of Joe's victims throughout the years. And hashtag Joe Goldberg goes viral. Dottie comes forward next, then Sherry and Carrie, and then Beck's friends, then former students. Paco comes forward too, defending Joe, but the internet's like, yeah, this kid is linked to another dead guy, not looking like a bunch of coincidences. Seeing this, Joe blackmails Maddie, threatening to release the video of her killing Reagan if she doesn't help him. So Maddie sets up an interview with a popular TikTok influencer, Kim Kramer. Joe denies the allegations and shows them the plexiglass cage where he has a breakdown about his past. And the crew takes 5 to allow Joe to pull himself together, telling him that that's the kind of that'll make him into a meme. While all of this is going on, Joe receives a text from Bronte saying that she told the police he was protecting her. And Joe goes back on camera saying that he did this all out of love for Bronte, and the entire internet rallies around him. After the interview airs, Bronte becomes the victim of online misogyny and she is kidnapped. But Joe was also stalking her and knocked the kidnapper out, before doing the same to Bronte and handcuffing her to his bed. Aye aye. Kate, meanwhile, takes a visit to Nadia in prison. I'm hoping she's got another trick up her sleeve. Let's see what happens in the next episode. Joe and Bronte agreed to give each other another chance. After confessing their deepest, darkest secrets to each other, Joe takes Bronte to the bookshop basement. The guy who tried to kidnap her, Dane, is caged up, and Joe's like, just tell me how you want me to kill him, babe.
Joe, this is crazy.
Glad you're finally caught up, Bronte. All the way over in London, Nadia isn't happy to see Kate. She's like, how did you not realize your new boyfriend was murdering your friends as the Eat the Rich killer? Kate's like, I didn't know. My bad. Just let me bail you out of jail, please. She tells Nadia she'd never ask her for forgiveness, but does ask her for help taking down Joe. Back in the States, Harrison and Maddie are about to bang, but Harrison immediately realizes that Reagan would never be this nice to him in bed. Now he knows that Reagan Reagan is actually Maddie. Jeez. Maddie calls Joe in a panic, needing help. When Joe arrives, Maddie's already tied Harrison up. After quite a bit of debate and Joe almost murdering Harrison, Maddie convinces him to keep his mouth shut. Oh, but Joe was looking forward to doing another murder. Down in the basement, Dane and Bronte have a chit-chat while he's locked up, and she gets him to open up about his mommy issues. Yeah, not surprised that Dane has those. Bronte then decides to let Dane go, and then somehow manages to convince Joe to lock himself in the cage to get him to open up. Bronte gets Joe to confess that he loves killing people, but Bronte doesn't buy it. She thinks it's just about Joe's mommy issues. She promises that she'll never leave him. Unlike his mom, that means he doesn't need to kill anymore, and Joe's like, yeah, sure, whatever, let me out. Bronte lets Joe out of the cage, and he just goes and kills Dane anyway. Classic Joe. Later, Nadia and Kate talk to a lawyer who says they have enough of a case to lock Joe up, but it could take years. After a very tense phone call with her serial killer husband, Kate is positive that they don't have years, so this just means that Joe has to die. In the penultimate episode of the series, Joe frames Harrison and Maddie for killing Reagan, and Joe also buys an engagement ring for Bronte. Yay, but he bought it just in time, right before Kate drained all his bank accounts, so Joe's broke and homeless, and now he wants to kill Kate. That night, Joe tracks down Kate, but it was a trap. Nadia and Kate knock him out and lock him in the plexiglass cage. They tell Joe that he can either fess up to all of the murders on a recording, or they'll kill him with carbon monoxide to make it look like a suicide. Kate and Nadia have a surprise for Joe, too. Oh, Marianne is back. Marianne gets to chew him out, and it's very cathartic to watch. She tells Joe that he's going to die in that cage no matter what. Marianne goes upstairs and catches Bronte sneaking around and has a chat with her, which she says resonates, and Bronte leaves. Downstairs, Nadia is like, screw the plan, and pulls out a gun. She and Kate go upstairs to discuss, and while they're gone, it's revealed that Joe cut open his arm to uncover a hidden key inside of his flesh. Why are serial killers always so prepared? Joe chomps his arm open, and Kate goes back downstairs alone, ready to do the deed herself, and a fight ensues. And Kate is shot and bludgeoned, but gets pretty good whack into Joe's head too. Soon, Maddie shows up at the bookstore. Harrison confessed to Reagan's murder and said he acted alone so Maddie could be released. Oh, he really did love her. Wait, so Harrison's fantasy was having a wife that loves him? Aw. Anyway, drunk Maddie dumps vodka all over Mooney's and lights a match to take revenge. Downstairs, Kate and Joe chat, knowing they're both about to die. Kate gets him to confess to killing Tom Lockwood and Love, and she gets a recording of it, which she sends to Nadia. Joe's like, whatever, we're both about to die, but then Bronte returns to the bookstore and drags Joe out of there, allowing him to propose, even after everything she knows. But it looks like she does believe Kate and Marianne. In a voiceover, Bronte tells herself that she's the only one who can stop Joe and that he'll never see it coming. Alright? Without any further ado, let's break down the series finale of You. Bronte and Joe are on the run after escaping the fire and getting engaged. Bronte isn't sure when to corner Joe or if she wants to kill him or turn him in, so there isn't a whole lot of time to plan, okay? Bronte just wants answers, justice, and an excruciating end to Joe's story, so a tall order. Joe tells her about the recording Nadia has, and they're fleeing to Canada with help from his old buddy Will, who will get them passports under fake identities. The couple drives to the border while some really good Taylor Swift plays in the background. Joe brings them to a vacation house so they can break in and crash for the night. Bronte is tense, and Joe is haunted by the women of his past. I really hope there isn't. Late that night, Joe and Bronte have a romantic boat ride, and right before they are about to have, relations, a little oingo boingo, a little fun time, a little adult fun time, Bronte pulls a gun on him and demands to know how he killed Guinevere Beck. That's the problem with abusers. None of us are too smart to fall for them. Bronte tosses Beck's book at Joe, instructing him to redact the parts he's written, and Joe does as he's told. While parsing through the pages, he tells Bronte that no one will ever love her like he does. Will calls Joe, Bronte allows him to answer. Turns out Will hacked into Henry's video game so Joe can talk with him over audio chat. So Joe tells Henry that he loves him and he's going to be gone for a little bit. However, Henry does not want to hear from his dad and tells him that he's a monster. Ouch. This causes Joe to have a breakdown, saying he's unlovable.
Why? How? How did I become this person?
Bronte is about to call the cops to turn him in, but Joe tackles her. They wrestle for the gun, and Bronte is shot in the side. For a moment, Bronte escapes, and she's able to call 911, but Joe catches up before she can tell them what's going on. Joe tackles Bronte again and drowns her in the lake right before the cops pull up. Joe then runs into the forest where he kills an officer, but plot twist, Bronte didn't actually drown. She finds Joe and holds him at gunpoint. Again, Joe begs Bronte to kill him, but Bronte tells him to call her by her actual name, Louise. Louise shoots Joe and he's taken away by the authorities. And the best part? We find out that sometime after the events of the lake house, Joe was put on trial. The evidence against Joe was overwhelming, and the allegations snowballed into a massive case. So, Joe will never see the light of day again. Dr. Nikki was freed, and Nadia began teaching writing classes to women in prison. Harrison was released from prison after 48 hours with a brand new prison tattoo, and Maddie is pregnant with their second and third child. We find out that Maddie was tried for her sister's murder, but didn't serve time in prison, given, this whole insane situation. The jury let her off the hook and was just court-ordered rehab for her pill addiction. But that's not all. Kate shockingly survived the fire and her gunshot, and now she has a bunch of badass scars. After she's appointed Teddy the CEO, he converted the company into a non-profit. Meanwhile, Kate supported Marianne's work, making her a famous artist. Oh, and also, she continues to raise Henry. Beck's book was republished without Joe's crappy additions, and as for Louise, she's still trying to find herself, but says she can't wait to meet the woman she becomes. Later at the prison, Joe whines about being lonely, and he doesn't even have his gorgeous hair anymore. He receives the occasional letter from a crazed fan, but they don't impress him at all. As he signs off, he tells the audience that this is the problem. Not his background or his choices, but our unrelenting obsession with men just like him. After all, what would Joe be without his enablers? And all the people who desperately wanted to believe his pleas that he was misunderstood. Well, guys, that was one hell of a show. I need to go take a shower now after all of that. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please like and subscribe and watch some of our other videos. And I'll catch you for the next one.